Your Creative Force by Avianne is currently available on Global Voice Radio.
Talent is a flame. Genius is a fire. Broadcasting from the San Francisco Bay Area, the all-new all-hit show on creativity. Hosted by international award-winning artist and entrepreneur, Avianne. You are listening to Your Creative Force. And now here's your host, Avianne.
Hi, this is Avianne coming to you from the lovely San Francisco Bay Area in California, the USA. Today, we are going to look at the topic of drama queens and ego kings. This is episode 30 of Your Creative Force, and yes, we definitely have to dive deep into this topic because drama queens and what I call ego kings are people that we come across not just in our personal lives, but definitely in our business walk of life as well. And if we know how to address, respond to, and effectively manage certain aspects of encountering drama queens and ego kings, I feel like we are setting ourselves up for greater success. So this is something that I feel I want to talk about because I come across drama queens and ego kings sometimes, and sometimes they drive me crazy, right? These are the kinds of people that are just always surrounded by drama, or they are just so bullheaded and egocentric, and they can even be narcissistic that they make it so impossible for you to work with them, and you end up just feeling frustrated and defeated all the time. And it's really hard. It's hard to pinpoint sometimes people who have these qualities, and it's difficult to sometimes know how to effectively address a person like this in a working environment, especially if you're the person in charge, right? I am very glad that I can honestly sit here and say to you that nobody who works for me is an ego king or a drama queen. I have learned early on to weed out these people from my organization because I personally feel that they end up wasting my time. They end up costing me more in frustration and effort to manage them than they're actually contributing to my organization. And I'm not saying that in a personally demeaning way or anything, but it is business, right? And when we're doing business, we want to work with people that can really strengthen our organization and aren't dragging it down. So I personally find it really difficult to work with drama queens and ego kings, but you cannot avoid them because they will come along in business. Sometimes they are my clients and I don't know it until I'm already way into the project, right? Sometimes they can be my students and it's just difficult to deal with. So I'm going to talk about this topic today, okay? In business, just like in our general walk of life, we come across people who can be what I call real drama queens or ego kings. So in episode 30 of Your Creative Force today, I really want to discuss and analyze these two types of individuals, how we can recognize them, and why and how we should deal with them effectively if we wish to enjoy doing business efficiently and free from unnecessary issues. When we learn to recognize and then how to address scenarios involving an ego king or a drama queen, we avoid so many of the pitfalls that come with certain personality flaws and also dysfunctional situations. If we fail to recognize or deal with these individuals in a productive way, they can usurp our business environment with a lot of exhausting and stressful situations, resulting from them behaving like they are starring in their own theater production at work instead of rather having them getting the work done and get on with the day-to-day operations in a streamlined way. Or like in the case of an ego king, they just drive you crazy because they're just so unteachable. You can't teach someone with a terrible ego problem anything, right? And because they're so unteachable and so rigorous in how they see everything and how everything should be their way or the highway, it becomes just impossible to deal with them, right? So we want to eliminate this problem, right? So there are ways to deal with people like this in business without harming the person, but really to cut down on the drama. And you have to understand something right from the get-go. Dealing with a drama queen or an ego king effectively does not make you a mean person, okay? You cannot allow any single one person to destroy a business you have spent years building, okay? As unhappy as it has made me and as terrible as it has been for me, once or twice in the past, I had to fire a person. I had to let a student go a few times, right? Because they were just upsetting my business and my entire operation so much that I couldn't do anything but let them go. But before you just fire someone, maybe there are things you can try, right? I think any decent business owner, you care about your people, you want to try things. And sometimes with a client, you can try some of these tactics we will discuss today. Hopefully it works. And if it doesn't work, well, in the end, maybe you need to fire the client or the person working for you, which is really hard. And please go listen at our other episodes before episode 30, in which we talk a lot about boundaries and all these other things, right? Today, we're going to dive into some similar things, but specifically focused on, firstly, what is a drama queen and an ego king exactly? And then practical ways to deal with people. I don't like firing people, right? But I have to sometimes do that. So I always look for ways like how we're going to talk about today, not to have it go that bad, right? If we can address things in a timely way and we can nip certain behaviors and certain boundary problems or whatever it would be that we encounter in the bud first, then we may not need to resort to actually firing someone, right? We hope we can avoid that. So, first, in part 1, what is a drama queen and an ego king exactly? So, these are lists I'm going to go over with you that I've created from my own experiences and also from some reading I've done on the topic before to help me deal with people who have these tendencies to be drama queens or ego kings, okay? So, a drama queen is a phenomenon that we all come across from time to time, and honestly, from time to time, most people can temporarily turn into mini drama queens. When we feel wronged or get sucked into gossip, it isn't a stretch for us to behave like a mild version of a drama queen. But most people don't stay in that space for long, and most people don't take it to the extremes. Some people sometimes, however, seem insatiable in their constant need to be the center of attention. And this is exactly what a drama queen is. They always seem to draw drama their way. Here are some characteristics stemming from my own research and experience of a drama queen so you can spot them quickly, okay? This person can be any gender, any age, any personality type, but usually they are extroverted, immature, self-centered, and in constant need of attention. Sounds exhausting, doesn't it? Okay, so if they don't get attention or aren't the primary focus of a social gathering or a business meeting, they will find a way to steer the entire experience or event in their direction. They will constantly say something inappropriate or act in strange ways that do not relate to the topic at hand in order to get the attention they want. They have what I call superstar syndrome. They want to be the star of the show and they won't allow any opportunity to pass for them or their issues or opinions to be heard by others, right? They are overly critical of other people. They read a lot into every situation and can act paranoid or exaggerate situations to stir up drama, even if there is no drama. Usually these types are obsessed with their looks and their relationships. They talk about it or flaunt it constantly and make others feel inferior as a result. They stick their nose into business that is none of their business. If someone else is getting married, for instance, they will find a way to position themselves in the wedding in a way that gets them notice. Or, for instance, at work, they will insert themselves into meetings and projects they have no business being part of and criticize the work of others even when there is nothing to criticize. They tend to gossip and spread rumors without any regard for how it may harm someone else. They act like they are the police of everyone. They can make people feel guilty or ashamed for no reason. Nobody ever measures up to their standards, and their standards make no sense to other people, right? It's like a moving target. You never know what this drama queen is going to say or do next. They're very unpredictable, I should add, actually. They can be quite unpredictable, and it can make it very difficult to have a consistent, mature, professional relationship with someone who basically, if you read through this, acts like a 2-year-old, right? That is basically a 2-year-old playing dress up. If I'm reading this and listening to myself saying these things to you, I'm picturing a 2-year-old playing dress up in my brain, okay? So, they can, instead of addressing problems with logic and reason, become completely emotional and irrational whenever an issue does come up. See, in business, sometimes we have to address things with people on a professional level, right? And I've learned in the past to explain to people, listen, what I'm telling you now is nothing personal. It has to do with the operations of the business. So I first need you to separate yourself as a person from what I'm telling you now that has to do with requirements of the business. And I try to make that clear to people, but they don't always see things that way. People tend to be very emotional if they are drama queens, right? And then it's very hard to explain to them that this is not a personal thing. This really is business, right? So they also never apologize for their mistakes. They tend to never do that, or hardly ever. And if they apologize, it's kind of like this pseudo apology that is really weird, right? And they cannot take responsibility for their actions. So what they do is they tend to blame shift and play the victim, right? One of the telltale signs of a drama queen is someone who constantly likes playing the victim. They kind of meddle in other people's affairs, step onto other people's toes. They cause a lot of drama. They cause a lot of issues. But then when that turns around to bite them in the backside, they tend to play the victim as if they never did anything to deserve that, right? It's kind of strange, but that's what happens with drama queens, right? So they don't manipulate others to just control them, but they do so in an attempt to cover up their own lack of substance or skills. This is a very important one, okay? Sometimes a drama queen personality is someone who's trying to cover up the fact that they actually feel very inadequate. Maybe they got a job because of their flamboyant personality, or maybe they got the job because they actually managed to drama queen someone into giving them the job, right? But then when they have to show the actual performance, the actual skills, when they have to actually bring substance and ideas and solutions to the table, they really can't. So to overcompensate for that, they then turn into a drama queen who manipulate people in an attempt to cover up their own lack of substance or skills, right? That is something you will see. They are picky and mean, and they want everything their way all the time. They're kind of mean, right? They will always kind of give you a backhanded compliment, or they would say something snarky, right? When it's not called for, okay? So it's important to consider that these are the kinds of things to look out for in order to identify a drama queen, right? So, moving on to an ego king, okay? Like an ego king, like a drama queen, an ego king can also be of any gender, right? Any gender, any age, or any personality type, but they can fly under the radar, especially if their work does not require them to work with large groups or people directly. So they are often in leadership roles because they can use their egocentric ways to push themselves forward in any situation, overtly or covertly. And other than a drama queen, ego kings tend to have substance. They actually are usually very intelligent and gifted in something specific, right? They like to master things and be superior in their own eyes to others, okay? So an ego king has similarities to a drama queen, but it is harder to spot because they don't always show overt signs of being ego-driven. They are not really narcissists. They can be narcissists, but they aren't really narcissists either. Narcissists narcissists tend to be very flamboyant, self-centered and controlling. Ego kings could be that way, but they have other qualities as well, okay? And so I will at this point just pause here and tell you, go look up narcissists, okay? Maybe I will do an episode on narcissism, but I don't know. But go look that up and go read about narcissists, because ego kings and narcissists have certain overlapping qualities, right, in their personalities. Okay, so ego kings can be very stubborn. They're usually bullheaded. They aren't teachable. And I think this is my main issue personally that I've come across. If someone is extremely egocentric to the point of being completely unteachable, okay, then you know what? Usually I can't really work with that person. Usually that ends up in us just going our separate ways. Because honestly, I don't feel like I should have to teach someone to have a teachable attitude. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like if you want to do a job, I have this approach that if I want to work for someone, I'm learning every time I'm working with students, every time I'm presenting a project, every time I encounter a client or need to do a big, amazing artwork for a client. I am learning new things also. I'm learning to do a new kind of subject matter, or I am learning to work better with a personality type that I don't usually maybe find in my environment that often, or I am learning new techniques, right? I cannot have this attitude that I know absolutely everything and nobody can teach me anything. That is a very unattractive quality. And most people just want to relate to you and feel like it's a mutual gig they've got going on, right? Most people don't like the idea of this is just like kind of a one-track thing and you're just doing your own thing. They want to feel included. They want to feel like they're sharing the project with you, right? So being bullied and unteachable is a really unattractive quality. Because it really interferes in business with the actual business part of doing business. You cannot teach an ego king anything because the ego king always knows better. It is their way or the highway. It becomes impossible for them to follow good advice as a result of this. They will rather sink their ship than actually do what someone else suggests. You know what? I'm going to give you a quick example. Someone I know actually knows a person who worked for a boss who had this golden opportunity to pitch this amazing project they were working on to Microsoft, okay? And this project would have made this company millions of dollars. It would have set them on a whole new course. It would have totally lifted them out of obscurity and made their brand well known throughout the world. And you know what? This guy, this boss, he tanked the entire thing because he didn't listen to a simple piece of advice that was given to him by an employee who told him, do not pitch the idea to Microsoft in such a way that they feel you cannot deliver it, that they feel you are overpromising and you will underdeliver. And guess what? This boss has such an egocentric way about him. He was such an ego king that he did not take that advice in consideration, and he became cocky and he became arrogant. And when he was pitching this in front of the Microsoft executives, he totally undermined the project because he totally went against the good advice, followed his own bullheaded thinking, and decided to sound like he's the greatest, the latest, the best, the this and the that, and he totally made them feel overpromised. Like he was overpromising them something, and they totally had the fear that he would underperform, and they totally walked away from the project, and the company lost millions as a result. And if this guy just railed himself in, listened to the good advice from the employee, and didn't do this, none of that would have happened. Isn't that terrible? So yes, they actually would rather sink their ship sometimes than to listen to good advice, and that is a real problem for an ego king, right? So, They are very good at manipulating people to do everything their way. They do not consider the impact that their stubborn, short-sighted ways have on others. They are difficult to please and push people to perform way beyond what is reasonable. They lack mercy and compassion, and therefore their expectations are often completely unrealistic, right? They want the rewards and the praises for things, but only if those things serve their purposes. Otherwise, they couldn't care any less. They will not admit they are wrong, but unlike the drama queen, they won't play victim or just blame shift. They will rather bulldoze their way forward and try to cover their tracks by means of the next greatest thing they accomplish or focus on. An ego king will lead projects with great determination and great energy, but will do so often without wisdom or finesse, because they think they are always right and they cannot see the value of a more subtle or slightly different approach to a problem. And that right there is probably their biggest downfall. And I have seen that, okay? I have seen that the biggest problem with ego kings is that they do not consider wisdom, because they don't like to listen to other people's advice. They like to do things only in their own way. What they miss is they miss the wisdom of someone who may have much more experience than them in a certain area of the job or the industry, right? And they also tend not to really go deep after studying things and solving problems. They just kind of do it on the fly, right? They don't always plan things very well because they go by their confidence. They're very confident people often. And because they think they know everything, they think they can do everything. And so sometimes they lack that depth. They lack going deep after things, researching things, really knowing their stuff on certain aspects of the job, because they think they already know everything, right? And then there's gaps. And then they overcompensate for those very gaps by means of more ego being shoved down other people's throats, right? And that is really, really troublesome. And that is really tragic, because ego kings are often really bright people. And if they were just willing to listen to some wisdom around them, they can actually circumvent a lot of their blind spots, okay? Now, I have picked drama queens and ego kings for our topic today, but it is good to pause here and just stand still on this point, okay? I just want to make sure that we're clear on something. Nobody is perfect. And when I'm talking about drama queens and ego kings, I'm not trying to say that I think I'm perfect and I always act perfect. I think anyone can be an ego king or a drama queen sometimes, right? Any one of us have the potential, in the right circumstances, under the right kinds of pressure, in front of the right kind of person, we can turn into a total drama queen, or we can totally become an ego king, just trying to stick to our guns and not listening to advice or whatever, right? And here's the beauty of it. Most of us, if we surround ourselves with good mentors, and if we are willing to be teachable and listen to wisdom, if we can only hang on to being teachable and listening to wisdom of those who know more, who's been around longer than us, and we can take some of that without taking it too personal, without playing victim, without any of the nonsense, right? If we can just sit still and even just tap into our own creative force, we can avoid getting stuck in that place of being a drama queen or an ego king. Sure, we're all human. We all have a propensity for these things under the right kinds of circumstances, right? All it takes is the perfect storm, and I can also kind of go, oh, I feel terrible, this isn't working, and be a bit of a drama queen, right? So I need to know that about myself, and I need to become self-aware. So please go and listen to our previous episodes in which we speak about boundaries and self-awareness and having good values and building character, because these things actually become your safety net. They protect you from becoming a drama queen or an ego king, okay? Nobody really wants to, well, I'm hoping, right, that nobody really wants to consciously be an ego king or a drama queen. But maybe some people just get stuck in that because along the way, they forget the other things. They forget about teachability. They forget about wisdom. They forget about the value that others also have to offer, right? We are not islands. We don't offer everything ourselves to another person. We need other people that can help us and that bring more juice and more meat to the table for our customers, for our business, right? So we have to remember these things, because they actually do apply not just to business, but to our everyday lives, right? And so with that being said, in part 2 of our show, we are going to look at how to deal with a drama queen in business, okay? So we'll be back shortly with part 2 of episode 30 of Your Creative Force.
Catch the fire of creativity. Visit artbyavianne.com. AVIANNE. And now we return to our show with Avianne.
And we are back with episode 30 of Your Creative Force part 2 today. And our theme for today, like we've said in part 1, is drama queens and ego kings. Now in part 2, we are actually going to take a good look at how to effectively deal with a drama queen in business. And interestingly enough, I stumbled upon this amazing article from the HuffingtonPost.com by Mike Harden. And Mike writes about 3 steps for dealing with what he calls drama kings and queens at the office. So he calls drama queens, drama kings, and queens. And he's referring here to something I mentioned in part 1 of our show. And that is the fact that drama queens are not just women. Okay. You have to understand that it can come, these types of behaviors can come from women. They can come from men. I have known extremely egocentric women in my life. And I have known men who aren't egocentric at all. And I have known plenty of men who act like drama queens in my life. And I have known women who will never be drama queens. So this is not gender specific. So Mike Harden for Huffington Post, and this was updated on November 5, 2014, last time, okay? On the Huffington Post blog, Mike Harden writes about 3 steps for dealing with drama kings and queens at the office. So let's go through his article and see what he is saying about it. Every workplace has drama kings or queens, people who are likely to hold meetings hostage with tears or sabotage initiatives because no one wants to deal with another one of their tantrums, okay? Remember what I said in part 1? They kind of remind me of 2-year-olds playing dress up. And then he's also mentioning tantrums, right? That sounds like about right. Anyone who's ever had a 2-year-old, I certainly have had a 2-year-old, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, right? These people do more than drain the collective energy of their teams and organizations. They draw on their resources as well, costing billions in lost productivity annually. And this is actually true, right? The thing about drama kings and queens is that their lines are predictable and they need an audience. What happens if leaders change the script? Interesting question, right? Now, I just want to pause here and highlight something for you. They are predictable in the sense that they are unpredictable because you never know what they're going to do next. You kind of know they're going to do something, right? So I said before that they're unpredictable. Well, they're unpredictable in the sense that you kind of never know what's going to set them off, right? But he says they're predictable. And I agree with that as well because they're predictable in the lines they will use. They're predictable in whenever they get triggered, how they will act or react to any given situation, right? So let's look at this a little better. And like Mike is asking here, what happens if leaders change the script, right? Well, you're dealing with an emotional manipulator. Forbes' Mike Matt aptly sums up the problem of subordinates who use emotional deceit as a weapon of destruction. Every workplace is plagued with manipulative people who use emotion to create conflict in order to cover up for their lack of substance. These people do not only get emotional about their particular stance on issues, but they also use emotional manipulation to get their way. Crying, sulking, wildly gesticulating, blaming, playing one side against the other, laying guilt trips. The list of tactics they use to leverage themselves or their position goes on and on, right? We looked at some of those in part 1. The high cost of drama. What do managers and coworkers do when confronted by Tony caliber dramatists? They say, don't cry, let's talk about this. It's okay, or calm down, don't worry, we'll get this done, or don't be upset, we'll just forget it for now. They try to appease the manipulators, and the manipulators win. They use their hysterics as a tool, an emotional hammer against individuals or groups. If emotional manipulation is a hammer, it's also a chisel working away at company profits. In Stop Complainers and Energy Drainers, How to Negotiate Work Drama to Get More Done, Linda Byers, Swindling, reports that 78% of employees spend at least 3 to 6 hours each week dealing with complainers and drama queens and kings. That is 150 to 300 hours per year at an average cost of $4,320 to $12,320 per employee. So overall, Swindling writes that energy drainers, complainers, drama queens, and hammer-wielding manipulators cost American companies more than, are you ready for this, $500 billion annually, right? Drama won't just stop of its own accord, especially after manipulators claim a few victories and the prevailing message becomes, I can get away with this. Oh boy, it really does sound like a 2-year-old, right? It's like dealing with a 2-year-old. And you can imagine, because what Mike is writing here about has mostly being applied to big companies. So you can imagine if big companies deal with this, small businesses definitely also deal with this, and entrepreneurs definitely also deal with this. I have been fortunate in that I don't really have to deal with this with my employees, but I had to deal with this before in students, and it is really, really difficult to deal with, okay? And just like a 2-year-old, you cannot set a precedent, because the minute an emotional manipulator, the minute a drama queen actually thinks that they have the upper hand, they're going to persist in that behavior. They will do it every time to get their way, right? It's like a child that's never been told no. And you know what? Sadly, maybe some of the adults who end up being drama queens, maybe they were children who never got told no, right? They never got told to suck it up and not have things their way and just accept reality for what it is, right? And so, oh my gosh, let's hope we don't raise our kids to be drama queens, right? That's what I'm getting out of this. Okay, anyway, so to go on with what Mike Harden is writing here about, we're going to look at dealing with office drama. So, first of all, don't capitulate. When someone becomes emotional, take a break. If it is in a meeting, take 5 and tell everyone to rehydrate, go for a walk, and grab a snack. The last thing you want to do is entertain the drama. A break is akin to the audience getting up and leaving the theater. The show does not go on. This is good stuff, right? So it's like when a 2-year-old throws a tantrum and you ignore them, because they play off of your emotion. A drama queen does the same thing. They will play off of your emotion. They play off the attention they're getting. So if you say, hi everyone, let's take 5, let's take a break and let's reconvene or whatever, then you're taking the wind out of their sails. You're not giving them that audience. You're not allowing them to have that attention, right? So that's quite clever actually. Then go into question mode. When you reconvene and everyone is calmer, begin asking questions. This forces the drama king or queen to articulate their answers and get back to facts. Take emotion out of the equation. They will not want to do it, but if you keep the questions logical and objective, they kind of have to. or they make themselves look foolish, right? So you're actually giving them rope, and then they can decide if they want to do anything with it, right? You're asking questions and you stick to the facts, okay? The one thing I have learned to never ever do whenever a student comes into my environment and acts like a drama queen is I've learned to not show my emotion. This is very hard for me because I am a very empathic, very emotional, very sensitive person myself on many levels. And when someone pushes my buttons because they are throwing their emotions out at me and their emotions are disturbing to me or destructive to me, especially in a classroom environment, and I am getting really annoyed because I'm thinking to myself, you know, you are rude, you are out of line, you are immature. Why are you even in my classroom? And I get really upset. I really do get upset. I can't help it. I'm human, right? But I have learned to not show my emotion. And you know, in a classroom situation, if that happens, it doesn't happen a lot, but it has happened before. What I do is I tell the students, I'm quickly going to the restroom. I'll be right back. And then I go to the restroom, take a deep breath, give myself a little pep talk, take a breath, go into the classroom, finish the class, and you know what? I just don't give them that attention. I just don't play off their energy. I treat them fair and kind, but I'm very precise with them. I do not play into the emotion. Does that make sense to you? And then after the class is over, then I will decide, okay, how do I deal with this? Do I tell the student, I'm sorry, we're not a good fit, the classes won't work out for you? Or do I find out maybe they had a bad day and maybe it's just a one-time thing, right? If it's just a one-time thing because the person just had a bad day, then we move on beyond it very quickly, right? If it's a matter of a character issue with the person or the fact that they are not a good match for my classroom and they're actually going to cost me business and they're actually causing me more problems than what they're actually helping me or helping other students in the class having a good positive experience, which is what we aim for in our classrooms, right? Then I find a different way to deal with it. And usually it works to take a deep breath and to just deflate the situation, okay? Then Mike goes on and says, you have to also evaluate the situation. Everyone is entitled to a mistake. There are situations that may evoke intense emotion, and even the best employees can react without thinking. The question is, does this happen often, right? This is what I was just talking about. What is this person's track record? Where is the emotion coming from? If it is a pattern of behavior, it's time to reevaluate the person's role in the organization, right? And we also have to remember with this point that Mike is making here, we have to remember context, right? I try in the beginning of me building my art academy and doing all these things, I often just didn't really have the experience yet to very much deal with things like this effectively. But over the years, I've learned context really matters, right? If a student comes into my classroom and they simply haven't eaten, or they're super tired, or they're having a really stressful day, I recently had a situation where a student who is on medication for ADHD actually came to the classroom and forgot to take their medication that day, and it really affected them. And it was not pleasant, but because I know the student and I know the situation, I understood that this was kind of like a one-time thing. It wasn't like really a pattern, right? But when this behavior, when this drama queen behavior becomes a pattern in your organization, then you have a problem, okay? Then you have to address it. Then you have to find a way to either nip it completely in the bud, or you may end up having to let the person go for the sake of your whole organization. Remember that an organization is like an organism, and it constantly fluxes and flexes and grows and evolves. But a drama queen can really hamper that organism from becoming all it can be, right? Because the drama is always in the way. So you have to find a way to get rid of the drama. And if there's no way to get rid of the drama, then the only other alternative would be to not have the person causing the drama in the equation. Does that make sense? So yes, the question you want to ask yourself after you've taken a break, gone into question mode, and evaluated the situation would be, is it a firing offense? Okay. When does drama cross the line and provide sound cause for firing the individual? If Ed from accounting stands up and throws a glass of water in someone's face in a fit of emotion, and Mike says he's seen it in here, we have a big problem. Well, Ed has a big problem. It is bad enough to have people within the organization who create and perpetuate drama. Worse is when managers, executives, and the CEO do not recognize it and take action, right? They enable the behavior and show others that they can engage in manipulation, drama, and conflict because it works. They know that if they do, they'll get their way. It becomes ingrained in organizational culture. Okay, remember that little word, culture. And it puts at risk the morale, productivity, and profitability of the company. The only thing worse than it happening is allowing it to happen. Okay, you have to understand this about running a business, about being an entrepreneur, about having any kind of organization. Okay, and I'm saying this with great empathy and understanding about what I'm saying. Okay, it is not always fun and games to be the leader, because the leader also has to set an example, and the leader also has to make tough calls, okay? And if someone were to come into my organization, I don't care if it's a student, person working for me, a client, whoever, and they behave in such a way, in a pattern that can really harm other people or my business as a whole and can destroy my business culture, which is the lifeblood of your business, remember, and please go listen to our previous shows in which we discussed healthy business culture and all of the above topics in greater detail. That is a huge problem. And I absolutely, if I have no other choice and I have no other recourse and people aren't listening and they aren't falling in line, I will have to fire them. And you have to understand that as a leader, if you aren't willing to fire people when you really have to, if their offense becomes a firing offense, you have to have the guts to fire them, okay? I know it's hard. And I only had to do that kind of firing. I only had to do 3 times in the 20 plus years that I've been doing business in my industry. I've only had to fire people for this kind of drama queen nonsense thing only 3 times. Okay. So I try and keep my culture and my business free from it, and it does help, because in 20 years, having had to do it only 3 times, I think that is a pretty good record, right? Pretty good track record, especially since I'm in the arts, and unfortunately, in the arts industry, we do come across a lot of drama queens. People are very emotional, typically, in the arts industry, and unfortunately, sometimes it can cause them to be extremely unprofessional, and it can even cause them to be unprofessional on a consistent basis. And so I think in the arts industry, firing people 3 times in 20 plus years for being drama queens, that's a pretty good record, right? So yes, let's hold our horses on that, right? And let's see what else Mike is writing here, okay? So the only thing worse that is it happening is allowing it to happen. Okay. And I want to read a little more about what he writes there. Here, I want to re-emphasize and actually reread some of what he writes here. Okay. It is bad enough to have people within the organization who create and perpetuate drama. Worse is when managers, executive, and the CEO do not recognize it and do not take action. Okay, you have to take action. Okay, and then reading more here about Mike. Mike Harden is an executive coach based in the DC area, serving Washington, Northern Virginia, and Maryland. And you can contact him. You can follow him on Twitter, Mike Harden on Twitter, and it is www.twitter.com/MP Harden. Okay, so you can get more about Mike there. And that brings us to the end of part 2 of our show today. Okay, and in part 3 of Your Creative Force episode 30, we're going to look how to deal with ego kings. So we'll be back shortly with part 3.
Talent is a flame. Genius is a fire. And now we return to our show with your host, Avianne.
And we are back with part 3 of our show today, episode 30 of Your Creative Force, Drama Queens and Ego Kings. Okay, so in part 3, we're going to look at how to deal with ego kings. And I've got good news and I've got bad news for you. Okay, because the issue with an ego king is that they usually just are so set in that way of being. And because ego kings are hard to detect, they get away with this kind of egocentric behavior for a very long time, and they're very set in their ways, and they're so bullheaded and so stubborn that it's so difficult to change this behavior that I have good news and I have bad news for you. The good news is you can handle them and deal with them through setting boundaries. The bad news is, besides setting boundaries with these people, there's not much you can do, actually, in reality, I think. I personally think you either have to fire this person or you have to set boundaries. If you are the boss, then you need to set the boundaries, expect them to be maintained. And if not, then you can have grounds to have this person not be part of your organization any longer, right? And in big companies, HR can certainly assist you with this, okay? In smaller businesses, you may get some legal advice and you may figure out how are you going to deal professionally with this ego king, right? But boundaries are usually effective with any kind of person. They just require that you use them on a consistent basis. If you want boundaries to work, you have to enforce them consistently. That's the trick with boundaries. And I do recommend listening to our show about boundaries. One of our previous shows were about boundaries, okay? Boundaries are very, very important, okay? And you cannot have a business without boundaries. But especially when you're dealing with an ego king, you have to set boundaries. And for boundaries, I went to the world famous Dr. Henry Cloud, How to Manage Boundaries in the Workplace, interviewed by Dan Schauble. Okay, Dan Schauble writes for Forbes, and he interviewed the world-famous Dr. Henry Cloud about how to manage boundaries in the workplace. Dr. Henry Cloud has made it his field of study, boundaries. Boundaries is his thing. He eats, sleeps, breathes, drinks it. Okay, so there's no better person to go and ask about boundaries than Dr. Henry Cloud. So Dr. Henry Cloud, Dan writes, is a clinical psychologist who focuses on leadership coaching, consulting and development with CEOs, executive teams, and organizational cultures. Dr. Cloud has written or co-written over 20 books, including the best-selling Boundaries series, which sold over 4 million copies. His latest book is called Boundaries for Leaders, Results, Relationships, and Being Ridiculously in Charge. You can learn more about him on his website or by following him on Twitter at Dr. Henry Cloud. That is at Dr. Henry, HENRY CLOUD. HENRY CLOUD. Dr. Henry Cloud. Twitter at Dr. Henry Cloud. Okay, so go find his books. I actually myself read one of his books about boundaries long ago, and it was about boundaries in relationships that are toxic because of some family situation I had to deal with. And it really helped me. It actually really freed me up to just say, no, these are my boundaries, and I expect my boundaries to be respected. I expect them to be upheld, because if we are going to have any semblance of a normal relationship here based on mutual respect and decency, we have to have boundaries, right? So Dr. Henry Cloud is absolutely the boundary guru when it comes to this topic. Okay, so in this interview, Dr. Henry Cloud talks about examples of leaders who don't set boundaries and some of the issues they have. 7 types of boundaries leaders can create, what happens when coworkers overstep boundaries, and more. Okay, so Can you name some leaders who don't set boundaries in their organization and the issues they have as a result? This is a question that Dan Schwabel asked Dr. Henry Cloud in this interview, right? Dr. Henry Cloud answers, I do not name leaders that I work with, but I could give you many examples of leaders who do not set boundaries and the kinds of issues they have as a result. The kinds of issues they run into fall into a few categories. Lack of clarity and direction so that talent can be properly engaged and focused, confusion in the ranks, toxic cultures that demotivate people and stifle their performance because the culture causes their brains to shut down, lack of strong company identity and cohesive culture that leads to high performance, disconnection and fragmentation among the departments or business units, lots of activity but poor results, organizational pessimism and powerlessness, lack of accountability, lack of high performance teams, trust breakdowns, and loss of respect and trust in leadership. Okay? Now, here's something I want to tell you. I don't know if you are connecting the dots like I am connecting the dots here, but when it comes to an ego king, okay, you cannot play their game. Just like you cannot play the game of the drama queen, you cannot play the game of the ego king, because the minute you play, you lose. The only way to win is not to play, right? So when you don't even pay attention to the ego king's ego and all their egocentric ways, and you start expecting them to instead adhere to things like you want high performance teams, but you don't want trust breakdowns. You don't want a loss of respect and trust in leadership. You don't want disconnection and fragmentation. And that starts becoming your focus. Then that may be an effective way to get the ego king under control, or at least keep them at bay, right? Okay, so what types of boundaries should leaders create, and how do you communicate them to coworkers? There are several important types of boundaries that leaders must set. Okay, this is according to Dr. Henry Cloud. Here are the 7 types. First, boundaries that focus attention on what is crucial and inhibit distractions from everything non-crucial while keeping the crucial ongoing and current. Number 2, boundaries that build a positive emotional climate that leads to high-performance brain functioning. Okay? Positive emotional climate, right? Emphasize that with the ego king. Number 3, boundaries that keep people connected to each other and inhibit fragmentation, compartmentalization, and isolation of people, teams, departments, or business units, right? Number 4, boundaries that steward the dominant thinking paradigms that rule the organization, keeping the dominant thinking optimistic and proactive as opposed to pessimistic and powerless. No negative or victim thinking patterns allowed to take root. Number 5, boundaries are to align people with the behaviors that they can actually control and that specifically lead to results, empowering them to do the activities that actually move the needle of measurable results as opposed to focusing on what they cannot control and or is not directly related to real results, aligning them with the true drivers of measurable results. Okay? Number 6, boundaries that structure teams around well-defined purposes with values and behaviors which lead to high performance through defined roles, activities, and mutual accountability, along with the ability to diagnose, correct, and fix what is not working quickly, right? Boundaries on themselves that keep them from being a closed system. This is number 7. Boundaries that keep them from missing and repeating patterns, not getting honest feedback, failing into problematic thinking or falling into problematic thinking rather, and falling into patterns that lead to fear, leading out of fear, avoiding necessary organizational change, not quarantining weaknesses, and losing control of their time and energy. Okay? Maybe one way to deal with an ego king is to point out to them that they are losing control of their time and energy. Can you see, this is almost like reverse psychology, right? With an ego king, you have to kind of implement reverse psychology, and boundaries can be a very good strategy to do that, okay? What happens when a coworker oversteps your boundaries and does something that upsets you? How should you respond to them? Well, Dr. Cloud says, this is a great example of when a team has a vacuum of leadership boundaries. The best thing to do would be to use the symptom as an opportunity to talk about some values and behaviors that the entire team could covenant together to implement in situations like this one. And then they would know what to do. For example, the value might be honest conflict resolution, with some agreed upon behaviors that would bring that to fruition, such as when we have an issue to resolve with someone, we go to them directly and seek resolution. We receive and listen when someone brings an issue to us. We always seek an answer that is good for both. That kind of value beforehand with these specific behaviors would lead someone to know what to do, not only in that situation, but in others as well, right? This actually does apply to a magnitude of situations, not just to an ego king, right? Then, okay, if you're managing a team that is completely dysfunctional, how do you go about setting things straight? Well, most teams that are completely dysfunctional have not ever sat down and really defined for themselves what their agreed upon shared purpose is, what their specific shared goals are, and their shared team values, norms, and behaviors will be that will make those happen. What their agreed upon roles will be to accomplish those goals, and what their mutual accountability practices will be to correct and fix things. So the answer is not to argue about it in each specific instance, but to come together and agree on what they're trying to build together. Establish some norms that will get them there, and then live those out, right? I tend to think of it as small baby steps to achieve the big picture and keep our focus on the big picture and not lose our train of focus, right? As we're trying to achieve goals. And sometimes if people focus on goals, they focus less on the drama queen and ego king type of behaviors within themselves and others, right? So that is also a way of looking at it, okay? Then, Dan Schwabel concludes this article that was written on May 10, 2013, right? That was the last time it was reviewed. Okay. And so he was writing here about what is your top 3 tips for business leaders for Dr. Henry, from Dr. Henry Cloud, right? And Dr. Henry Cloud says, first, be an open system. Open yourself to outside feedback, input, coaching, information, and energy. Closed systems run down and get more chaotic over time. Always get better by being open to outside energy and templates of better ways to function. Number 2, lead in ways that people's brains can follow. Do not confuse them with creating an ADD organization or team. Attend to what is relevant, inhibit everything else from becoming a distraction, and keep it in their working memory, i.e., keep it current and in front of them at all times. Then 3, create a culture that has heat with high performance standards and accountability, along with positive relational glue that keeps everyone supported and on the same team, pushing and supporting each other towards great results that they all own together. Okay? Dan Schwabel is the author of the upcoming book, Promote Yourself, The New Rules for Career Success. And yes, so you can go and read more about that. Do follow Dan Schwabel on Forbes, and do follow Dr. Henry Cloud on Twitter. Okay, they're both great guys. And we are concluding today's episode with our quote of the day, which is from the famous author, speaker, and also a boundary and psychology guru, Brené Brown. Okay, she says, daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves even when we risk disappointing others. And with that, I will conclude episode 30 of Your Creative Force today. Drama Queens and Ego Kings, it was wonderful to be with you guys today. Have a good rest of your week, and I will see you next time.
Talent is a flame, genius a fire. Visit us at artbyavian.com. Tune in next time as we explore your creative force. Thank you for listening.